What's up, guys? We're back with week 2 of Prospect Plebs, and I'm here again with Tiny Elephant and King Bonk. And to start off with, we got the new top 16 power rankings that came out week 2. And just for the top 5, we have Gallimimus, Pioneer, Wobegongs, Legends of Tomorrow, and Drizzle. And I think Legends of Tomorrow and Drizzle are the only two that were maybe even in the top 10. Actually, I think Pioneer was there as well, coming from week 1. But the other two are big movers, Gallimimus and Wobegongs. So any thoughts on the new power rankings for this week, guys?
I think just looking at Gallimimus, obviously that's a huge step up for them. They've done a lot of work to get to where they are. Their strength of schedule is not particularly high right now, but you can only play the schedule that's in front of you, and they've delivered on that promise. Similarly, Kappa's made a gigantic jump. They're 10-6 after week 2, and I think that this power ranking honestly rates them appropriately. The final team that I personally think made a big jump, and I'm very impressed by, is Zomberries. They didn't move up super far in week 2. They're 14, so they actually dropped one. But what bore out over the course of the week was a team that's much better than that ranking. And so the fact that they held serve, and in a time when like my team Firecrackers got dropped straight out of the top 16, a lot of really good teams got dropped out of the top 16 that are only starting to find their form. Props to Zomberries for recovering really quickly, and now they look like a really strong team heading into week 3 of this season.
Yeah, we'll get to the results of this week, but I think they did put together a really good week for week 2, right?
They did.
Another big mover that kind of stands out to me is Snow Owls. They were not even in the top 16. And personally, after week 2, I think they might even be a little bit higher going into week 3 than what they're at right now. The team showed very strong, and we'll get into one of their games this past week. But I'd just like to point out that I think Snow Owls is also a very strong team that made a good jump. Anything stands out for you, King Bonk?
Like Elephant said before, the Kappas making it from not even top 16 to just on the verge of top 5 is impressive, to say the least. Hopefully that they will break the top 5 this upcoming week. We'll see how it goes.
A fan of the Kappas, we'll see. Okay, I think we're going to move on to the outcomes for this week 2. First, we got on the screen Monday's results. And just to start off the week, we'd like to talk about the server issues that we had going into Monday, and even over the weekend that delayed the start of our RLCS, right? So we had server downtime, I think, Saturday, and I'm not sure if there was some Sunday. I heard that there was. I personally didn't experience it.
I think it was earlier in the day.
Okay. And then we thought it might have all been fine, but come Monday evening, afternoon, the servers go down again, and RSC actually cancels the games for Monday night just as the servers come back up. So a lot of teams ended up still playing and reporting that, but they weren't required to since they were officially canceled, or not canceled, postponed. So there are a couple of games on here, such as one of our games of the week, Drizzle versus Gallimimus, that didn't actually get played, and we're still looking forward to seeing, but we're not going to be able to tell you when that game's going to happen. It's just got to happen before the end of the season.
Yes, so they have rescheduled officially for February 25th. I just talked to one of their players.
The 25th, okay.
That's a long time.
Yeah, that's in 3 weeks, I think. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's on Tuesday from 3 weeks from now. Okay, well, we'll be looking forward to that game. Maybe the landscape's changed a little bit, and then at the time that game runs, it's not as interesting as a game. But I don't imagine that it won't be, considering the show that Drizzle and Gallimimus, both of these teams, have put on so far.
I agree. One thing I think that's interesting.
Go ahead.
Sorry. One thing I think that's interesting about the server issues is there were some teams who very strategically chose how they rescheduled, I think. In terms of, I think Gallimimus versus Drizzle is very intentional in terms of, I don't think anybody's trying to avoid the matchup, but I think that there's definitely a sense that there might be team roster changes just as players become available, because we're about to get into the shakeup season that is the week 3 range in RSC. And so I think for both those teams, it makes sense to wait and see, hey, maybe a player that's underrated but they think's really good comes available, because that could completely change, even for a team like Gallimimus that's 12-0, could change their roster makeup. And so giving themselves as much time as possible to get that new player in and be comfortable before they have to play what could be a really pivotal matchup, I think is really smart.
Yeah. And I know, talking with my team going into Monday, we were all like, let's chug forward, let's play the game, because we were hyped going into Monday. I guess, I don't know that we didn't consider like strategizing a rematch, but we were just excited to play. So I think that's why a lot of teams continued to play Monday night, is because they were expecting to get to play some competitive Rocket League, and they were upset with the thought of not being able to. So,
absolutely. I know for us personally, a couple of our players got the ping from Cake, and we're like, "Oh, okay, I'm not playing tonight." So we tried to round them back up, but once that happens, you got plans change, and so we had to move ours to Thursday.
Also, one interesting game on here for me is the Seoul versus Punch Out game. Seoul comes off with their first 4-0 of the season, and as we look at the Wednesday outcomes, I believe they get another 4-0. So in week 2, Seoul is undefeated. So that's something to possibly look forward to as they find their form throughout the season.
Agreed. I think one of the things that really benefits Seoul kind of
that's the team with
going
Ninjatron.
forward with Ninjatron, yeah. So one of the interesting things about Seoul, are you sure they 4-0 twice? I see 6-10 as their record.
Yeah, I think that's on the outdated stats. Stats just got updated before this, or rankings or standings or whatever just got updated on the RSC website before
I got you.
we started recording. But I think what we have for the results of Monday and Wednesday are correct though. So
okay, so specifically talking about Seoul, I think one of the things that they've really benefited from is they went from a week 1 set of matchups that were pretty devastating in terms of who they had to play to this week they got to play teams that were at their tier in terms of just like relative ability. And they had another week to gel, and I think they really took advantage of that. There's something that a lot of teams don't. Just looking at what's happened this week, there's kind of been some stratification as teams that were struggling continued to struggle, and teams that are doing well kind of have kept going. And so props to Seoul for riding the ship and getting a really solid weekend after a really rough first week.
Yep. Let's go ahead and move on to Wednesday real quick and get through the rest of the results for week 2. So Wednesday we have another 4-0 by Seoul against I don't know how to correctly say it, Urix or Urix.
I think it's Urix.
Untamed team on his franchise. And so that's another good showing from them for this week. And like you said, it's not one of the best teams in the league they played, but it is one of the teams more at their level, and it shows that they can dominate teams. I think they had a pretty tough schedule going into week 1, but week 2
it's a good morale booster.
Yeah, really good morale booster for Seoul going forward. And Ninjatron, love that dude. We also have Gallimimus continuing on their unbeaten streak with the 4-0 of Airbuds. I don't know when this is going to end. I guess you guys can predict, but I'm like at the point where I'm going to just start rooting for them,
They become the league favorites.
Other than that, across the board on Wednesday, I don't think there was anything that we didn't expect too much. Those were the only 2 4-0s of the week. Anything you guys want to point out?
So, let's see. Just kind of looking through at some interesting results. The one that really stuck out to me was the 2-2 for the Breadsticks.
Yeah.
Against the Nebelungs.
And Nebelungs is not a bad. Nebelungs is not a bad
team.
Yeah.
Jack is a great player.
They're currently 8-8.
To pull out a 2-2 after a really rough start to the season, that's commendable, and I think that's something that should be mentioned. That's really impressive, and that's something that is hard to do sometimes, to get out of a slump.
And I'm looking forward to actually going into week 3 for Breadsticks and see what else they can do, if this is a little bit of a boost that they need, because if they can 2-2 Nebelungs, they can 2-2 a whole bunch of other teams in this series. They could probably
agreed.
I think that there's plenty of series they could even win throughout the season. So I don't think the season might have started off bad, but I don't think that's going to define the season whatsoever.
Don't count us out yet.
Agreed.
Yeah. How did you guys feel about that series with Nebelungs?
Oh, you should have heard us when we won the first game. We were just ecstatic.
Oh, the
about
feeling
it.
when you go into a series against a team that you like nobody really expects you to do well against given your previous record, and then just winning the first game of the series is just like insane. I know going into our matchup with Wabagongs, we pulled off the first game, and we were super hyped. Unfortunately, we couldn't continue that throughout the rest of the series, but I understand where that's coming from.
Yeah, also on the point of Jack, their player, as soon as he joined in, yeah, he kind of swept the floor with us. As you know, they won the 2 games once he joined. So
Yeah.
I
yes, I
mean,
do respect Jack.
my thing is, you play the team that's in front of you. So like it doesn't matter that Jack wasn't there. They still have a good lineup and y'all won your 2 games. So that's
Yeah.
absolutely something to be proud of and to take pride in going forward.
Okay, I think our next headline, as we get out of the results of week 2 and into kind of the bigger ideas, is Pioneer versus Snow Owls. We all had Pioneer ranked very high coming out of week 1, I believe anyways, and they lost the series 3-1 against Snow Owls. And I reviewed the series, the replays, and I will tell you what, I'm tempted to say that series win was almost entirely contributed to Red Dime. He popped off this series. There was 12 points scored by the Snow Owls team in the series, and 10 of them were scored by Red Dime.
Mm-hmm.
Did you guys have a chance to review this series, and what do you guys think about this win for the Snow Owls against a good team?
So I've looked at it. So the interesting thing about the Snow Owls is they have a stack team.
Well,
Red
and I
Dime
want
popped off in the series, and it's a great job by him. He did so much, and Pioneer's a really good team, and he ate them alive.
to. Yeah. And
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just continue. If you have a point, go ahead. I'll get to this after this. I wanted to hit on a point that you mentioned about them having a
Yeah,
stack team, but
I got
continue.
you. The thing about Snow Owls is that they don't need him to be that great every game. It's not like Nebelungs
Yeah.
with Jack, where the second he came back, they won their 2 games against Breadsticks. Red Dime can be at a more consistent, not 10 goals in 4 games level, and still be immensely impactful, and they can still win comfortably, as their sweep showed this week too. So I think this is a real landmark moment because I still value Pioneer highly as a top team in our tier, and to go out and beat them like this shows a lot of ability that we probably didn't give them nearly enough credit for.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to hit on the fact that you mentioned they had a sack team. And while it does look like that, I did want to point out, like, watching this series, I couldn't help but think that there was somewhat of a carry by Red Dime. Like, if you take Red Dime out and replace them, like, looking at Red Dime's stats, for instance, he's number 1 in the tier for points per game. He's number 4 in the tier for goals per game. He's number 1 in the tier for goals for index, which is a comparison of how many goals he's scored scored compared to how many goals the other team typically allows. So he's one of the better offensive players in the game, if not one of the best in the tier. And if you look at his other teammates, I think he only has one other teammate that is above 80 in rankings for points per game and above 60 in rankings for goals per game. So it almost seemed like if you took him out and replaced him with another team player who was pretty good, but not the best in the league, say around 20 or so in those rankings, that I don't know that they could have came away with this series.
I mean, I intend to agree, but also I think it really I think you're right to point that out, but I think Zyred's a really good player in his own right.
Oh, and he's the one that has been above the numbers I mentioned as far as being ranked above 80 in points per game and above 60 in goals per game.
Yeah, so I think Zyred's a really good player. I think when you look at what he does as a second man / first man passing, those are really solid numbers. And then following that up, his defensive numbers look spectacular. So when you have a player who can be that just fundamentally sound next to a player like Red Dime, that's really good. Like that's a stacked team.
Yeah, that's the stacked part of the team. But my question for both of you is, going forward, in order to continue winning series like these against Pioneer and going forward even like Wobegongs and other teams, do you think that they may need to look at eventually finding a more consistent third?
Well, I will say something on this. Because Red Dime currently is an offensive powerhouse. All right, you cannot deny that. So you need someone who can either be an assistant powerhouse or another offensive powerhouse to carry that team's offense and just be one of the most dominating teams in scoring.
So when I look at Merlin's stats, just because I have it pulled up, Merlin does this really solid job as a third man. He and Four Cyclones both. They have a very stagnant fourth man role, looking at like where they position, or not fourth man, third man position.
And just to point out, I think
But
in the series they
play
played
that
most.
smart.
I think they played 4 Cyclones the entire series. I might be wrong, but just from the replays I got up and the ones.
Yeah, no. So watching it, I'm 90% sure. They're both very stagnant defensive third men, and it makes sense for this team. Because
that is a valid point.
They do the right things. If one of the things that I've come to realize in RSC is if you have 2 players, you can basically just do a 2s rotation and have the third be someone who booms the ball to a player who can go get it. That can be very effective. They have to be very good, right? You can't have like 3 league average players try that because they'll just get run over. But if you're someone like Red Dime who is an offensive powerhouse, and you have a second player in Zyred who makes great passes, is in the right position a lot of the time to make plays, you can absolutely do that. And so I don't know if you necessarily want a third to come in who's going to want more touches, to want more shots, to rotate in a more traditional way. I just watching them, they do rotate, in a threes manner, but they rotate heavily favoring Red Diamond Zyred because they're so good at what they do. I don't think you want to bring in somebody like, let's say, one of the transactions that happened this week is Snakey. Snakey is an immensely skilled player coming out of free agency. Snakey, I think, wouldn't fit this team. They'd be very good, and I'm not saying he couldn't fit this team, but I think what he does well is harder to fit in with this team than what Merlin or Four Cyclones can provide. Now, I may totally eat my words. They may find someone great and they fit in perfectly, and that'd be awesome. That makes them even scarier. But I think there is value in looking at people want to play in a certain way, and it's hard to find someone who's willing to eat their ego that much to allow 2 people to just absolutely dominate the game.
And you mentioned the transactions of the week, so I think we can move into that. But I think those were all good points, and I'd be interested to watch Red Diamond and his team as they move through the series. I think they're going to do good no matter what, and I'm not sure if they intend to ever look at a new third. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I guess that's something that is better determined by watching than trying to predict. But the transactions for this week, we had 2 kind of significant ones, in my opinion. First of all, Animal Noise was cut from the Templars, and they signed Moldy PPJ. What are your guys' thoughts about this? I played with Moldy PPJ quite a bit, and I think he's a pretty good player, but I also think Animal Noise is a pretty good player, and part of me wonders what happened with that transaction there.
I've known Moldy since season 5, when his original name was Vivify Gaming. He was a solid player when he was with us, and we unfortunately cut him to replace him with another guy. But it was kind of bad timing because Vivify, or Moldy PMJ, started to click with us, and oh my goodness, we were quite dominant when he was in sync, when he was in his prime, to say. Like, you couldn't do anything. He was just all over the field. So,
and are you familiar with Animal Noise at all and his skill level? Because I don't, like, I think they're both good players, but nothing really stands out to me to say that Moldy is like so much better. Do you think it's more just of a mesh type thing, and maybe Animal Noise wasn't fitting in on the Templars as well as they had hoped, and they decided to make a change?
Unfortunately, I do not know much about Animal Noise, but
what about
that could
you,
be the
Elephant?
case.
My thought is, just talking to Moldy and having looked at Animal Noise a little bit, I think sometimes you just have fit issues. That's no one's fault. But sometimes you have to step away and be like, I need to do something different. Especially when it comes to the Templars, because their season wasn't going super hot. So sometimes you just have to step away and be like, all right, we really need to make this change. Where was Templars last week? Templars was towards the bottom of their setup, 3-5, and then this week they came into it at
15.
5-11. So
I thought we were talking about the rankings. My bad. They
No, I got
moved
you.
into the top 15. I think they were. I don't know if they were even top 16 last week.
yeah, so when they went 3-5, it made sense. And now at 5-11, sometimes you just have to step away and be like, hey, this isn't working. Then they make the move midweek. If that's the case, it makes even more sense.
Yeah.
Just to kind of step away and be like, all right, we have our chance. Let's make this change. And long term, it could be beneficial. But sometimes you just have to do it.
Yeah, I think the transaction was on Wednesday, so that makes a little bit more sense. I don't know if it was before or after the game on Wednesday. But
you always want a team that can sync with each other the best.
Mm-hmm. And I could see if Animal Noise wasn't able to fit in with Matty Ice and Heisenberg as well as they had hoped, I could see the switch for Multi there.
Yeah.
Another transaction kind of significant that happened this week was Panda was cut from Gorgons and they signed Snacky Snack. I always say Snacky Snack.
Snacky Snack?
Snacky Snack, yes.
You mentioned Snaky is a really good player. Do you think this is just a matter of Gorgons needing a really good offensive player, or what?
I think that there again were fit issues with Panda and the Gorgons.
Yeah.
Just in terms of there was some definite frustration both from him and from Linky and Heartless in terms of fit, in terms of how they wanted to play. And Snaky was on that team. He was their 5th overall pick, and they cut him without ever letting him play in a game. So, with that in mind, sometimes you just got to go back and say, okay, if we thought this guy was worth a 5th overall pick, let's get him in here. Let's see if he's a better fit culturally for what we want to do. And I think that's what they've decided. I hope the best for Snaky. I think the fact that he's fixed his boost button and it no longer sticks will probably really serve him well. And I think Panda will end up on another good team. Panda's a really solid player who probably needs to be in a place where it's not so much on him to be the entire offense, entire powerhouse for that team. I think Gorgon's really depended on him to do a lot.
Yeah, and that's going to frustrate a player if you have to rely on just one person specifically. They'll get tired of it eventually.
So I guess in that sense, then that probably makes a good case for that transaction. And I look forward to seeing how Snaky performs as he gets a chance to actually play games throughout the rest of the season. So yeah, I think we're going to move on to each of our top 10 picks coming out of week 2. We're going to start off with you, Elephant.
All right, start off with me. So mine, once again, probably disrespecting Gallimimus a little bit, is Snow Owls, Gallimimus, Wobegongs, Sparks, Pioneers, Zomberries, Isopods, Legends of Tomorrow, Care Bears, and Kappas. Just 2 quick things is I know Isopods are 8-8, but the only team that really got a good, solid win against them was Snow Owls. And if that's the team I rate as my highest in the tier, I don't hold that against them. And then similarly, I think Zomberries, after starting out a little bit rough, look really, really good and are a really scary team to play now.
They kind of came out from nowhere, and if you look at their record, they've proved themselves for the most part at this point, at least against the teams they've played. So I think Zomberries is definitely probably a top 10 team at this point. I guess we're going to go ahead and move on to my top 10. Once again, I have Gallimimus at the number 1 position. I find it kind of insane, Elephant, that you still have them at number 2, and they're coming out of week 2, still haven't lost the match. This team is obviously doing something right. Number 2, I have Wobegongs and Snow Owls for similar reasons as to why you have them number 1. I got Sparks after that, Legends of Tomorrow, Pioneer dropped down a little bit just because of their loss to Snow Owls. Then I have Zomberries, Drizzle, Kappas, and Dolphins. And I keep Dolphins in the 10th spot because even though there are some teams not in my top 10 here with a more impressive record than them, I still think this is a really good team, and I don't know quite why they haven't pulled off as many wins as we probably had expected them to in the first couple of weeks. But I think it has a little bit more to do with the teams that they've faced. I think they've had a pretty decent schedule so far, but also like we've played them in scrims, and when they can pop off, they can pop off. And if they can and find a recipe to pop off for each game for the rest of the season, they're definitely a top 10 team. Okay, Bonk, you got your top 10 for us?
Yep. So going down, I got Gallimimus, Wobblegongs, Zomberries, Care Bears, Pioneer, Legends, Snow Owls, Kappas, Dolphins, and Neblungs. So I'd like to preface this by saying the Snow Owls record was not updated when I made this list, so I would replace Care Bears with Snow Owls.
Would you just
And-
shift Care Bears, Pioneer, and Legends down one and put Snow Owls up there, or would you actually put Care Bears and Snow Owls in their separate spots?
I would just replace the two.
Okay.
The Snow Owls would be fourth.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Gallimimus is number one because they're still undefeated, which is, like you said, pretty impressive. But if that was not the case, Wobblegongs would be number one for me because of, again, they're an offensive powerhouse. But their defense, with their total saves, it's a little toward the middle, lower part of the tier for all the teams.
I think that's mostly because no teams can generate any offense against them. If your opponents aren't able to put shots on net, then how are you going to have save stats, you know?
Oh yeah, true.
I agree to a point. I think that there are weaknesses that Wobblegongs have that will be exploited more as the season goes on. They play a very aggressive style that as teams get more used to it, just like teams got used to Pioneer a little bit, I think you'll see more teams start to snipe off games from them. One thing I'll say just to why I personally don't think Gallimimus is the number one team in the tier is here's the difference in strength of schedule right now between Gallimimus and Snow Owls. Snow Owls is faced the second toughest schedule in all of Prospect. Gallimimus has faced the 28th toughest schedule.
I'm interested, who's faced the number one toughest schedule?
The number one toughest schedule I do not have in front of me. When it was updated originally, at the time of this, it was Firecrackers, but I do not believe that's the case anymore.
Okay.
But yeah, Firecrackers is no longer that. So my point being this: Gallimimus has faced, because they haven't played Drizzle, they haven't faced a good team yet. That doesn't mean they aren't a good team, but that does mean that I don't view being undefeated at this point as something worthy of just being the number one team. Now, if they go out and just kick butt next week, then like, yeah, I'll probably just be like, okay, yeah.
I think that's what you said last week, though.
Or Gallimimus. But my thing is they didn't. They played one team that was not very good, and they didn't play their matchup against Drizzle, which is the team I wanted to see them play. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I think they're bad. I put them two. Like clearly, I think they're very, very good. But I think that there are teams who have losses already who are much better teams compared to the records they've or the strength of schedule, the opponents they've faced.
By the way, Airbuds has played. I think it's Airbuds that have played the number one strongest schedule.
All right, awesome.
So far. And yeah, we had a lot of hype for Airbuds coming into the season. That kind of makes sense why they've kind of dropped out as far as rank is concerned, because they've been playing these super tough teams. But as they get into probably the easier part of their schedule moving forward, I think they'll start to come back up. If that's all we got for the top 10s, I think we're going to go ahead and move to our conference standings. And I would like to point out that these are not updated because they were updated just before we started recording. So some of these are not completely correct. So we're just going to kind of glance over them for a second. And it's going to be hard for us to try to make any interesting commentary when they're not all correct. But this is the Solar on screen right now. I think for the most part, this is where most teams are standing. I think there's just a few that are swapped around here and there. And here is the lunar standings. So with that, I think we're going to move into our games to watch for going into week 3. So our first game on Monday, we have Gallimimus at Care Bears. Any thoughts on this game, guys?
So we've played Care Bears. Care Bears are a very good team. They
Hmm.
they are very smart in how they play. They're scary to play against. If you make mistakes, they will punish it. And Gallimimus does some really good things that I think will give Care Bears problems, but I don't think they'll be undefeated coming out of this matchup.
Yeah, I think this is almost like our Drizzle versus Gallimimus game we were expecting to see this week, in the sense that we think this team could probably take a game off of Gallimimus.
Hopefully
Absolutely.
the servers won't screw up.
Hopefully.
I actually want to see this game.
Yeah.
Yes.
We'll make sure to get the replays in so we can all review it and have some commentary for next week.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it next week. And I think our second matchup for Wednesday is going to be fantastic.
Oh yeah,
it's one that I want to see streamed personally.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the best matchups. And actually, I think we should look into whether or not have streams been has signups been secured already
So
for
signups
Wednesday?
have happened, but I know multiple people on Wobegongs. I can always reach out and see if we could potentially do some kind of like streaming.
Because I would definitely
Wobegongs
be down
is
to watch
11
this
and
game.
5. Snow Owls are now 13 and 3. So it's gonna be a hell of a matchup. That is two teams that I think. My honest belief is either team at their best can 4-0 the other team.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the.
No.
This is probably one of the best matchups we've seen so far in the season.
I'm very excited. I think this is going to be something that we're going to be able to look at afterwards in the ball chasing and hopefully with the replays and really get some interesting play.
And with the offensive powerhouse that is Zaire and Red Dime, I think we'll be able to see if Wobegon's defense can hold up and if they are able to play defense.
This is the first team I don't think they'll be able to just keep pinned in.
Yeah, they've generated tons of offense, and I think once
this is going to be a shootout.
Yeah, it's going to be a high scoring game. I'd be willing to say probably I don't know, more than 25, maybe 30 points total in the series.
I could see that. I absolutely could.
Yeah. So
watch it be like a 10-9 brawl.
Yeah, it's just defensive, standoff. No.
Yes.
So I think that's it for this. Anything you guys want to mention or anything before we get out of here?
I think next week's going to be interesting. I think there's going to be a lot of transactions in Prospect that we're going to have a chance to talk about. This isn't hinting at anything. I think this is just the reality. We are now at crunch time. If there's a lot of teams that if they have another 2-6 week or 1-7 week, you're looking at basically not having a chance at playoffs. So I think we're going to start seeing some real moves, even if it's just replacing one player with a free agent who may not even be as good, but just being like, maybe this player fits us better. Maybe this personality works out for us.
I think so too.
This is going to be the most dramatic week so far.
I want to spend so much time looking at those replays for Wobegongs to Snow Owls. I hope it lives up to the hype.
Yeah, me too. Okay. So I think that's it for us, and we're gonna head on out. That was week 2 of Prospect Plebs, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like the video. See you next week.
See you next week.